MAGA hats are free speech. Did you ever doubt it? Well, some people did. In fact, this guy got an earful when he was a teacher at a school. This is Eric Dodge. You see this photograph of him. Very handsome gentleman standing out there in a beautiful field. Very vivacious horses in the background. Greenery in bloom. It's just beautiful. And you'll notice he happens to have a Make America Great Again hat tucked right there, nestled close to his bosom. And he got in a lot of trouble over this hat. He was a teacher at a school. We have some background before we read through the case that tells us that the MAGA hat is free speech in America, baby. So this was written by Daniel Weissner from Reuters. Some background in the story. This is a MAGA hat. We're all very familiar with those here. A U.S. Court of Appeals, the Ninth Circuit, on Thursday last week, revived a Washington middle school teacher's claim that a principal at the school violated his free speech rights by threatening to discipline him if he continued to wear the hat. 3-judge panel came out of the Ninth Circuit. We're going to read through the full opinion. And so we'll fast forward through some of that. We want the background here. Lawyers haven't commented on this, but some time ago, this happened in 2019 into 2020 school year. Dodge was a longtime teacher in the district. He brought the MAGA hat to trainings before the start of the school year, according to the decision. So not to class, right? This is actually a training. Garrett told Dodge, Garrett is the principal, told Dodge that other faculty members were offended. She said, hey, MAGA insurrectionist, if you don't stop bringing that hat to school, you need to have your union rep, right? So bring in your boss to come talk to me. So Dodge filed a harassment complaint against Garrett, the principal, but the local school board ordered a subsequent investigation into Garrett's conduct, and she ultimately resigned, right? So it's probably a little bit more than that one comment, I'm guessing. Dodge sued Garrett and the school district, saying he got retaliated against. U.S. District Judge in Tacoma, Washington, dismissed this case. Everybody thought it was gone. The judge said Garrett's immune from lawsuits because her alleged actions are not clearly unconstitutional. And the school district was also immune too. But the Ninth Circuit brought this one back. Panel includes judges appointed by Bill Clinton and another one by Ronald Reagan. Let's go through the full opinion and see what they have in store for us. From the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, the case is Eric Dodge versus Evergreen School District, the MAGA hat free speech debacle. This opinion, filed December 29, 2022, argued submitted much earlier in the year, back on April 15th, before a number of judges out of the Ninth Circuit. Now, ordinarily, we read through those summaries, but it's a short opinion, so we can read through the whole thing. Writing for the court, Judge Forrest says, ladies and gentlemen, the question in this case is whether the First Amendment was violated when a principal, Garrett, told a teacher that he could not bring his Make America Great Again MAGA hat with him to the teacher-only trainings on threat of disciplinary action. The school board affirmed the denial of the teacher's harassment complaint against the principal. Eric Dodge, the plaintiff, the person suing this entity, was a longtime teacher there. Now, before the school year began, he attended 2 days of training and he brought with him his MAGA hat. Caroline Garrett, his principal, considered the hat to be inappropriate because she has TDS potentially. Who knows? After consulting with the district's chief human resource officer, Janae, Garrett, the principal, told Dodge at the end of the first day that he needed to exercise better judgment. She said, listen here, Dodge. Principal Garrett learned that Dodge brought his hat. When she saw it the second day, she called him a racist and a homophobe, among other things, and said that he would need to have his union representative present if she had to talk to him about the hat again. Listen here, you bigot. I told you yesterday not to bring that hat and express better judgment when you're on my campus. So Dodge sued her and the officer from the HR department for retaliation. Says, this is America. I have free speech. It's my protected political speech. So the lower level court, they held that the principal and the school had qualified immunity, so they can do whatever the hell they want. The district court also granted summary judgment for the district, and they concluded that Dodge failed to show a genuine issue of material fact. They say, nope, you really didn't bring a claim. There's nothing to even sue about. They dismiss the case. Dodge appealed this case, and they reverse it. So we have a little bit of legalese to deal through here. But before we get into it, there's some background. They say that this case was resolved on the defendant, the school's motion for summary judgment. And so they're going to view these facts in a light most favorable to Dodge. Dodge is the guy, the teacher. He had his case dismissed. So we're going to reconsider the motion to dismiss his case in a light most favorable to him. We're going to give him all the benefits of the doubt in this matter. Dodge interacting with Principal Garrett. We get details here. Dodge worked as a teacher for 17 years. During the 2019 to 2020 school year, he was assigned to teach at the Wyest Middle School for the first time. Class 6th grade science. Love science class. This week before school started, Dodge attended a cultural sensitivity racial bias training. Oh, the story gets better and better. A cultural sensitivity and racial bias training. So, of course, he brings his MAGA hat. Is that provocative? Absolutely. I thought it was just like a regular training, you know. Okay, this is what your kids are going to do the first day. All right, yeah, we're going to do this. And this is my first day at school. It's like, you know, formalities. Not cultural sensitivity and racial bias training. Okay, so this guy is bringing this to rub it directly in their faces. Good for him. He says there were approximately 60 attendees at the training. Dodge wore his MAGA hat up to the front doors of the school and then took it off when he entered the building. See? That's not even provocative. All right. So right to the front door and then took it off. Oh, man. So he's not even like being actively instigating. He's being only passively instigating as he's walking up to the building. During the training, Dodge sat near the back of the room and placed his hat either on the table in front of him or on top of his backpack. He did not wear his hat during the training. Outstanding. Now, the professor leading the training saw Dodge's hat, and she complained to the principal. After the training, she said that she felt intimidated and traumatized from the hat. We have Principal Garrett also learned that Dodge's hat upset a few teachers who attended the training. One teacher had cried and another found the hat, quote, threatening. Those people shouldn't be teachers. I mean, they shouldn't be teachers. Like that, a hat is threatening. That's insane. They're not well in the head. Now, there is no allegation that Dodge did anything with his hat during the training other than place it near him with his other things, nor is there any allegation that he did anything to interfere with or disrupt the training. He just had it there. Now, the principal called the HR officer, Gomes, to discuss what could be done, quote, without infringing or disrespecting anyone. Fair. That's good. They agreed the best option was to talk to Dodge directly, explain the reaction that the hat had elicited, give him a heads up that he was most likely inadvertently causing distress, and give him an opportunity to respond to that. I don't think it was inadvertent there, friends. I don't think so. I think it was pretty advertent. It was in direct response to your pretty advertent propaganda training seminar to try to tell him your thing was active political speech intended to be shoved down his gullet. He did accept it. He went to your stupid training and he sat there. He brought a hat. He left it there. If it inadvertently caused you distress, I think that might be on you. He wasn't doing anything disruptive, as the court is noting. Now, later that afternoon, Principal Garrett did speak to Dodge in his classroom. She asked Dodge why he wore the hat. And he stated he wore it to protect the sunspots on his head. Obviously. Because you don't want stuff. Look at his head. He doesn't have any hair. That's why he needs the hat, obviously. So he doesn't get a sunburn at his very long, painful, cultural, racial sensitivity training. What if they go outside to talk about the racist son? He also explained that he, quote, likes the message behind the hat because it, quote, speaks to everybody by saying, let's all do the best that we can and be the best that we can at whatever it is we do. What a beautiful message. Nice guy. Now, Principal Garrett responded that some people take that hat as a symbol of hate and bigotry, and that while she could not ask him to stop wearing it, he should use better judgment in the future. So Dodge tried to explain. He says, listen, Madam Principal, I wore the hat to show that maybe they're not all bad, right? You know, you're here today talking about racial and cultural sensitivity and diversity and inclusion here. Principal, I'm trying to facilitate that by letting you know there are others of us out here that don't like to be prejudged, that don't like prejudice, and we don't want to be discriminated against. And on this beautiful day of unity, we're bringing this message to you. Now, of course, she doesn't like that because she only likes people who are in alignment with her political ideology and political narrative. It's never about inclusivity and diversity, or inclusion or any of that stuff. It's all about purging dissenters, if you boil it down to it. So by the end of the conversation, these two are just like talking at each other. You can tell they hate each other. And by the end of the conversation, Dodge understood that Principal Garrett was effectively asking him to not wear his MAGA hat at the school. For her part, the court is writing, the Ninth Circuit. For her part, Principal Garrett said that Dodge denied trying to engender some kind of response with the hat. He denied it. So it's like, are you trying to get a rise out of everybody here? No. I have sunspots I'm worried about. That's all. By bringing it to a racial equity training. She also said that Dodge attempted to talk politics during their conversation, but that she, quote, shut it down. So the next day after this little problem, and both these people were very upset. They both went home, probably a big catastrophe. Dodge attended another training the next day. That time it was held at Evergreen High School. He again wore his MAGA hat before entering the building and then took it off while he was inside. A teacher who was present at the first day's training saw the hat and texted Principal Garrett. I'm going to tell the teacher on you. So Principal Garrett again called Officer Gomes. This time they agreed that Principal Garrett needed to set a clear directive with Dodge to not have the hat in training where it was causing the disruption to the staff. Now, when the training at Evergreen High School was over, Dodge drove back to Y-East for the third training that was later the same day, back to where the original scene of the crime was, the MAGA hat murder. This time, he left his MAGA hat in his truck, and he did not bring it into the building. When the training was over, Dodge stayed behind to talk to the principal about teaching classes other than science. He says, can I do other things here? Now, the parties disagree about what happened during that conversation. Dodge says that when he approached Principal Garrett, the principal said to him, what is the effing deal with your hat? Okay, and she used the full word there. It's in the court opinion. The judge had to drop the F-bomb in here. What is the effing deal with your hat? She also, apparently according to Dodge, called Dodge a homophobe and a racist and a bigot and hateful. Yeah, I mean, I think, we've been called all of those things. That sounds accurate. I mean, I'm only speaking anecdotally here, but that sounds accurate. That mirrors my experience of psychopaths. And when he denied wearing his hat at the Y-East the second day, she called him a liar and specified that she did not want him wearing that hat, period. You don't wear it at all. I'm in charge here. So finally, Principal Garrett said, quote, the next time I see you with the hat, you need to have your union rep. Bring your rep because I'll have mine. Principal Garrett disputes that she was mistreated or that she did mistreat Dodge. She said, I didn't use any profanity or raise my voice. But she does say, yeah, I was frustrated, and I view Dodge continuing to have his hat with him as insubordination. Later that night, Dodge emailed Principal Garrett stating that he was taken back by our conversation today when you told me that if I wear the hat again, that I better have a representative with me. See why he sent that email? He's making a record. Good for him. Hey, just want to follow up on the conversation we had with you where you called me a bigoted, hateful, racist Trumper. He stated that her, quote, unprovoked attack made him sick to his stomach and nervous, but that he was sorry for offending her. Principal Garrett responded 2 days later, recounting that he admitted to wearing the hat to purposefully provoke a reaction in a response from his colleagues. So she's covering for her little butt there. She explained that her reference to union representation only meant that if we needed to discuss the MAGA hat again, I would have another administrator with me to take notes and you'd be invited to bring a representative. Principal Garrett forwarded Dodge's email in her response to HR Officer Gomes, who praised it as an excellent response. So they're very happy with themselves. Meanwhile, this guy's running circles around them. He sent her an email to confirm that she basically threatened him. And then she's like admitting to that, saying something like, well, I had to because you purposefully provoked a reaction from colleagues, right? The only reason I had to say those things. So she probably admitted everything. And then the HR people are like, great job. All right. So the district's investigations then commence. So Dodge then goes, oh, you know what? I'll take your advice. We will actually go get our union rep involved. After the second encounter with Principal Garrett, the representative did contact the district. They were informed that the district was not going to take any action against the principal. So Dodge filed a harassment, intimidation, and bullying complaint against the principal. Dodge also requested a transfer to a different school. The complaint was sent back to HR Officer Gomes. Initiated an investigation, had to do it through company policy. Third-party investigator came in and did that. Now, at some point during the investigation into this principal, Officer Gomes from the HR department received a public records request from a local news agency related to the complaint. She told Dodge that responding to the request may require her to disclose information from his personnel file, but that she would not have to disclose information if he withdrew his complaint. Wow. She also advised him that the investigation into his allegations would proceed even if he withdrew his complaint, and he declined to do it. So it looks like this person, right, Officer Gomes, is kind of saying, listen, buddy, I'm going to have to spill a bunch of information about you unless you stop all of this. Doesn't sound good. So the third-party company completed their investigation. They prepared a report. The preliminary report did conclude the following, quote, Dodge MAGA hat wearer was singled out because he wore a MAGA hat, and he was subjected to negative treatment and denied his freedom of expression. Why? Because of perceived stereotypes and political differences of opinion. Exactly the reason they were hosting this stupid school event about racial acceptance or whatever is to combat stereotypes, to break down the walls. But this principal was erecting them, even bigger than the border wall. The preliminary report also found that Dodge had not violated any school policies by having his hat. He probably read them thoroughly. That Principal Garrett had allowed other types of political messaging around the school, obviously, right? It's probably, BLM all over the place or whatever is popular. And that her reference to union representation was reasonably perceived by Dodge as a threat of discipline. Nonetheless, the preliminary report determined that Garrett, the principal, had not technically violated any school policy because the district's anti-discrimination policy did not ban discrimination based on political beliefs and that she didn't arise to harassment or bullying. So the officer reviewed the preliminary report from HR department and he asked them to change some of the language. She was concerned that their conclusions about a violation of Dodge's freedom of expression. Wow. So that'd be like me going to an expert witness to analyze a blood sample, right? The police draw your blood in a DUI case. They do their own testing. If we want to do our own testing, we get an expert witness. But our experts, they can't change the numbers for us. And if we ask them to change the numbers, that would be insane. They would say, you're insane. That's unethical. But that's exactly what happened here. She's saying, we don't like your final report. We're supposed to contract this out to an independent third-party agency so we're not involved in investigating ourselves, right? You're investigating yourself, and she doesn't like the report. So she says, can we change some of this language here? This kind of singles him out. It makes it look like we singled this guy out. I know we did that, but I don't want the report to say that. So CRS removed the language that they had concerns about, right? That would never happen in the law. If I ever asked one of our expert witnesses to change an outcome of a number, right, it would invalidate all of their reporting. Nobody would ever trust their reports again. But they did that here. So relying on the final report then, the HR officer determined that no policy violation had occurred, wrote a letter to Dodge explaining no further action would be taken about his complaint. But she also stated that the district would transfer him to a different school. They would educate all employees about engaging in political discourse. She assured Dodge that he would not be retaliated against. Dodge appealed this, and the school board ordered further investigation about Principal Dodge. Now, there were also other complaints about the principal lodged by school parents. The school board ordered further investigations. So everybody else is angry at this person. During the second investigation, the school board informed Principal Garrett it had a strong belief that her conversations with Dodge were not as she represented. Oh, so they think that maybe she lied about those conversations. She kind of fibbed a little bit, not as what she had represented. In addition, there's concerns about her professionalism, which brings her credibility into question. The school board gave Principal Garrett the choice of resigning as the principal, accepting a demotion, or facing disciplinary proceedings. Of course, she resigned at the end of the year. No, I'm good. I'm not going to take a demotion on this. So there were district court proceedings. Dodge ultimately lost this at the lower level. He appealed, and now he's winning. So we go through a little bit of the case law, individual defendants. When we ask ourselves about the First Amendment, this stuff is always fun to see the different elements that are appropriate in these cases. So they tell us, right, these are the rules. We talk a lot about the check boxes here, who checks the boxes, who's got the burden to do the checking of the boxes. Here, a First Amendment violation, the type that Dodge is alleging the principal committed against him, in order to establish a case, a prima facie case, a First Amendment retaliation claim. What did Dodge have to show? One, that he engaged in protected speech. Can't file a claim if it's not protected speech. That the defendants, in this case, the principal, took an adverse employment action against him, threatening him with union representation, and that his speech was a substantial or motivating factor for the adverse employment action. All right. Now, take a look at this factor here. Was it speech? That's another question. Was just the simple possession of the hat speech? Certainly, that has to be checked if he's going to win. We know he won, so let's see what happens here. Now, whether a public employee like Dodge has engaged in speech breaks down into matters. Whether he spoke on a matter of public concern and whether he spoke as a private citizen or a public employee. So they give us some analysis on this. And let's see what we conclude. In summation, because the undisputed facts demonstrate that Dodge's hat conveyed a message of public concern, make America great again, and he was acting as a private citizen in expressing that message, we conclude that Dodge was engaged in speech protected by the First Amendment. He had no official duty to wear the MAGA hat, not required to perform his job. He did not wear the hat in school with students. It distinguishes his case from other cases, right? In other cases, a teacher wearing something like that, saying that if a teacher officially wears the hat in front of the students, it might look like the school's officially promoting the message. But he wasn't doing it in front of the students. He just walked it in and set it aside, essentially. Now, Principal Garrett says that she was right to do all of this. Same with Officer Gomes. But the court says the record fails to establish that the officer took any... Okay, so he's going through different claims. So his claim against Gomes, which is the HR person, will fail. But let's fast forward through the rest of this opinion and see how they conclude for us. Longer opinion than I thought it was. So as we get near the end, we see the conclusion writes for us as follows. In conclusion, taking the facts in a light most favorable to Dodge, a jury could find that Principal Garrett retaliated against him for engaging in political speech. Any violation of Dodge's First Amendment rights by the principal was clearly established where long-standing precedent has held that concern over the reaction to controversial or disfavored speech does not justify restricting the speech. Just because you don't like the message doesn't mean you get to shut it up. So for those reasons, the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals reverses the district court's grant of summary judgment in favor of Principal Garrett. Otherwise, we affirm the district court's summary judgment in favor of Gomes and the district court for the reasons explained above. So the case is back open, right? In other words, reverse the lower case, allow this man, Dodge, to complete his claim, bring his case, and make the case that he was trying to make in the first place. The dismissal is reversed. Each party shall bear its own cost, they say. Affirmed in part, reversed in part, and remanded. So the case is not, over. This will go back down to the lower level district court where they will come back and hash through what this court has detailed for them. But as you can see, a lot of good case law here, and they do a big deep dive. We fast forwarded through a lot of this, but all of these italicized entries are all case law. They say, while some of the training attendees may have been outraged or offended by his political expression, no evidence of actual or tangible disruption to the school operations has been presented. Political speech is the quintessential example of protected speech, and it is inherently controversial. Some may not like the political message that's being conveyed. That's par for the course, and itself is not alone for a basis for finding disruption. So Principal Garrett's asserted interest in preventing the disruption does not outweigh Dodge's right to free speech. For all these reasons, Dodge has presented sufficient evidence to create a triable issue about whether Principal Garrett violated his constitutional rights. And so this will make its way back down to the district court, and we'll see what happens when they get the case. But that, my friends, is Eric Dodge versus Evergreen School District. And of course, we will continue to follow this case and many others like it. It is free speech in America. And Eric Dodge was standing up to some of the nonsense that we've seen happening all over the place. And it sounds like he followed the rules, was a real gentleman about it. And he dealt with a individual who had a whole prior slew of complaints, ultimately resigned. Eric Dodge, victorious in the lawsuit, fought it all the way up to the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. And so ultra mega shout outs to Eric Dodge out of the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. Very fun case. All right, my friends. And that is it for us on the day.